Welcome to today's New Hampshire PATH virtual conference, Safety and Outreach.
Thank you, Tony. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Baxter from AHP, and today we're going to be talking about safety and outreach. Our learning objectives today would be increase your understanding of diverse experiences, perspectives, and safety needs of individuals experiencing homelessness or co-occurring SMI and SUDs. We're going to learn actionable techniques for ensuring safety, including de-escalation, and we're going to discuss strategies for staff safety and security while conducting outreach and engagement activities. So the first thing that we need to jump into is promoting safety in street outreach, how to maintain your safety while helping others. To start things off in the chat, I'm hoping that you can give me some ideas about your definition or application of the word safe. Being aware of surroundings when you're in the field, excellent. Both physical and emotional, excellent. Minimizing risk, fantastic. Wonderful. Now, here's a question too. Does your definition or application of safety depend on where you are or who you're with or what you have with you or escape routes? Situational awareness, good. Definitely varies situation to situation. Very true. So as we go into exploring the topic of being safe during outreach, I think you guys are hitting on it. There are many different types of safety. You can have safety from violence or escalated incidents, from diseases and infections, which are very common in our environment. You have the emotional and psychological safeties as well. What is one of the most recent things or most common things that you see perhaps from the diseases and infection standpoint when you're outreaching to the PATH target audience? Dirty needles, excellent, absolutely. There might also be human waste. There might be physical, yes, poor hygiene, open cuts, broken glass, excellent. Wonderful. COVID. Yep. That was a very interesting time when we were first being told that COVID existed, wasn't it? Made a complete 180 for our outreach methodologies. So in today's environment, there are a lot of factors that go into safety. There are recent events and national narrative shifts, and that can sometimes be changing on a daily basis. There are universal precautions and preparedness with no guarantees. There's an increase of number of those experiencing mental health issues. As a result, and according to the Council on Criminal Justice, there have been an increase in aggravated assaults and robberies and burglaries. The organization is saying that aggravated assaults have gone up 4% and robberies have gone up 19% in the first half of 2022 compared to the first half of 2021. Domestic violence, that was another thing that was on the increase in today's environment. We have a 5% increase between the first half of 2021 and the first half of 2022. And that was just based on 12 cities that were in the study. So our circumstances around us have really changed. And this is what's giving us a renewed interest in how to stay safe, because it's not just the physical. And as you guys have mentioned, it's the emotional, it's the mental, it's all kinds of safety. So there's lots of benefits to safety and outreach. Obviously, physically, your personal safety. There is the safety of the people that you're trying to reach. There's an improved chance of connection with the people you're trying to reach. Another benefit is the decrease in violence. So that can lead to fewer physical problems and fewer mental problems. Being safe during outreach has many steps. The first of those steps is to have a plan. Many of you might have heard in a previous presentation, but I'm an EMT, an emergency medical technician, and I've been one since 1993. And when you go out on a call, you're given certain parameters of information to prepare for that. And there are a lot of parallels to this in the outreach world. For instance, when you're toned out, when you hear the tones ring for your organization and you're like, okay, we have a call, the dispatcher gives you a location, a type of incident, number of patients, the ages if they're available, the duration that the incident has been happening, and any additional information to deepen the understanding and your preparation for arrival. So how do these pieces of information affect your response? It might tell you, who should you be sending? When you're looking at information, when you're going out into a particular area to do outreach, you want to gather similar information to what you have in the EMS world. Where are you going? Where are you living? Where is someone living or being seen? What is the known activity in that area? Who are the people in that area? What is the type of experience? So is it a newly experiencing homelessness person? Or is it someone that is there because of domestic abuse? What about the number of patients or the people in this particular situation and their ages and how long they've been experiencing this? So just in the comments in the chat box, what different types of things might you change depending on any of these pieces of information? For instance, if you know someone, the type of incident is because someone's out there as a result of domestic abuse, what might be a consideration for you? Travel in groups of 2. Don't go alone. Have a phone on you. And if it's someone that's experiencing domestic violence, exit plan, very good. Speak separately, okay? Notify law enforcement that you'll be in there with a non-emergency. Perfect. You guys are getting way ahead of me. I have a lot of this coming up in our coming slides. That's great. One of the things that you might consider, using the information. So if it's someone that's there as a result of domestic abuse and it's a female or someone identifying as female, would you necessarily send in a male? Do you think that there might be some hesitation for that person to want to talk to someone that might have a parallel to what put them into this situation to begin with? That might be a consideration. You also might want to consider the cultural background of the responder, or possibly send in a person that has lived experience in that same type of stimuli that put them into experiencing homelessness. Why? Because you have an increased chance of that person being able to connect and being open. And if you're going to a person that has a physical disability, might you want to take some materials with you that might help them? If you know that someone has a wound, if you can, could you take a nurse out? Could you take some wound care products? Don't carry anything of personal value. Good. Whatever you do, and something that can be learned again as that parallel to emergency medical services is the scene safe? Meaning, is it okay for me to enter, or am I going to end up being another patient or victim in the situation? You need to make sure that your scene is safe because it can affect your own safety and your ability to help others. When we are taught as EMTs, is the scene safe? If there's a power line down at a motor vehicle accident and there's water on the road, there are a lot of steps. Even though you see that person and you want to help them so badly, there are steps that need to be in place before you run right in. Because if you run right in and that electrical wire zaps you, you're now a patient yourself and you can't help, and you've now extended the burden to those that are trying to help. So you don't want to increase the severity of the situation, so you minimize what can happen based on who you send and what you take with you. You also need to have a plan. As some of you were mentioning, so very astutely, I might add, never go out alone. Teams of 2 should be considered an absolute minimum, and this is coming from the National Council of Healthcare for the Homeless. They suggest not going out alone. Establish code words. So this seems a little simple, and you'd be amazed how throwing out a code word, you're trying not to display a particular reaction, but else that situation or get you the resources that you need to deal with it in a more immediate way. The office or clinic should always know where you're going. And someone had mentioned, hey, letting people, including law enforcement, know that you will be in through a non-emergency line. Also letting your peers know or your supervisor know where you're going to be working. And whatever you do, try to keep to a set schedule. You know, if people will notice that you're not where you're supposed to be, they might be looking for you. So they might know where to look for you, which can get you the help you need or get you to escape that situation more effectively. And for those of you who are technologically savvy, there are a lot of phone applications that can broadcast your location, that other people can find your location through those if you have a signal. So those are some things you can do before conducting outreach. Another part of having a plan is to surveil where you're going to be. You know, we talked about a little bit in the other slide, you know, knowing what the sites are like, knowing what common activities. If this is a place known for a lot of drug activity, do you think going in there in a suit is really going to be effective? Probably not. You might want to look at sending in a peer, someone that is more comfortable in that environment, someone that is savvy in knowing how to talk through or get out of situations in that particular environment. Also, some communities will use peer specialists and even trusted clients to kind of identify that they're to be trusted, or to make a connection into the reorganization of that unit of living so that they can make the more personal connection. Once you're on site, other people with you can help provide that situational awareness that everyone was mentioning in the chat as well. When you have someone that has also been there, done that, that peer that has that lived experience, if they've lived unsheltered homelessness, you might have a few keys as to where to go to find a person, or what types of things might encourage a person to come out, or what types of things that community would avoid or that person might avoid if they're living alone. It's amazing insight what you can get. And if you're out and you're going as more than one person, you know, wear clothes that indicate who you are and possibly why you're there. If you wear matching clothing, or ideally, you know, a bright color so that your team is easily identified, that helps people be more open to you because they know what you are. You aren't a stranger and they understand why you're there. So it's more apt that you can be safe going into that environment. More in having a plan, make sure that you have linkages with the crisis response teams and behavioral health support. If there is an issue, people that know or have experience in talking down the situation or getting immediate help for those that are experiencing particular problems is very beneficial to you. You might even need to have some de-escalation training. That might be something very beneficial because, you know, a lot of people think that communication as a degree isn't necessarily that great a thing, but how many things in life don't involve communication? whether it's interacting for your job, obviously, as outreach, or interacting with other humans to, negotiate a rate on a fix for your house, or getting the best deal on clothing, or whatever the case may be. Being able to communicate, and in this case, de-escalating a situation, can help save you harm. Also, you want to employ your harm reduction principles. So safety and comfort are not the same thing. Understand that when someone is comfortable in a situation, they may not be safe, and vice versa. And know that it's not so much what actually is a threat, because you might not have any ill intent whatsoever, but if you're perceived as a threat, that could be very different, even though you aren't a threat. And one thing to keep in mind too is there are different perceptions of what is and isn't a threat from person to person. So just because someone is using drugs doesn't mean that that's a threat to you or to your safety. To other people, they might think it is. And while you might be very tempted to take out some forms of personal defense, whether it be weapons or mace or pepper spray or something, keep in mind these things can actually escalate your situation if they're used on people. A lot of times, especially if you're in encampment situations and such, this is communal. This is an environment in which people depend on each other, and you have to be really aware of the social dynamics in these areas, because if you essentially attack, in their perception, one of the family members in this case, it could escalate very quickly because people are going to come to that person's defense. So having something that could be either used and made a situation escalate, or be stolen from you and used on you, just isn't the best plan. And make sure that you actually make time for outreach and debriefing of potential situations. I mean, we have stress debriefing training as EMTs. Yes, and don't carry anything of personal value, because that is a temptation for people. Absolutely. So when you take time to debrief, this is being trauma-informed. So you need to have trauma-informed supervision of your outreach personnel. You need to create that safe space so that people can, again, prepare and be ready themselves to help others. When you are employing trauma-informed communication and activities with those that you supervise, it can be very beneficial and opening and trusting, and lead to the person being safer overall because of communications. Review all your safety protocols as well. Make sure that you touch base and people know where you're at, and that you're adapting to the environment. Another good thing for our particular employment area is know your limitations. We talked about the different types of stress and different types of threats, but there can be safety in the form of physical, mental, or emotional. So if you know that physically you're not up to it today, maybe this particular location up this hill, etc., might not be your best bet. What if you end up having a cardiac incident? Or what if you end up breaking your leg? Or what if you trip because you don't have the strength that day? Also, this applies to the mental and emotional. If you're not prepared for a certain environment, this is why it's so important to survey the environment, you won't be able to function properly, and it might lead to you becoming hurt. Know your areas. This is kind of common sense, but you need to learn. And again, this is person-centered in what we do. So you need to learn the needs of each community, if you can, prior to going out there. And spend time learning the culture of these communities. And I say community because, again, I'm thinking sometimes in terms of encampments, but even if it's an individual situation, you still want to know the culture of that individual or that couple or family as well. And again, you're going to hear this from so many different sources, but National Healthcare for the Homeless is still reiterating, do things in pairs, and if possible, do your initial outreach with people that are known to the residents to use that as an in to the community. You have that warm handoff from one of the own. Focus on your initial efforts on identifying and establishing the rapport with the leader. Again, getting buy-in usually starts from the top because people want to appease those in leadership. So if you have the person at the top saying, this is okay, this is approved, you have much more buy-in from those that are reluctant at first. And when you understand the needs of that area, you can also tailor your approach based on those needs. If you know that water is the biggest need in this area, coming in with bottles of water or jugs of water might be more helpful than showing up with socks. Whatever you do or who you take or when you go is tailoring your approach. And again, knowing the needs beforehand can help you do that most effectively. Some other preparations you want to do before you conduct the outreach is make sure that your phone is on and charged at all times. Make sure you have the emergency numbers in there. Someone was mentioning letting people know on the non-emergency line. Having that in your phone might be useful as well. Be aware of any recent violence in the community. You guys know this, but you've got to have a pulse on what is happening. And if you know what is happening, you might also know what people's reactions might be heightened toward. So if there was a recent sexual offense that happened, be very careful with who you take in, of what sex you take in, because that might result in heightened reactions to your presence. You know, if you need to reschedule meetings and activities until situations are under control, that can be okay. Make sure that your vehicle's maintained and fueled. If you need to have a fast escape and your car won't start, probably not your best situation. Make sure that you keep properly hydrated. As simple as that seems, it's very much overlooked. But hydration can affect your ability to physically escape as well as your ability to mentally cope with different situations. And of course, make sure that you wear weather appropriate clothing. So you want to develop a consistent schedule. This is part of conducting outreach as well. So before you go, you know, kind of give an idea. Do I normally show up on Tuesday afternoons? Do I normally show up on Thursday evenings because it comes after this resource is supplied by this outreach team, etc. Make sure that you're coordinating as much as you can and tailor the outreach days and times to either the availability or of the people that you're trying to reach. You know, would you go in at 11 o'clock at night? Probably not your best bet, but if you go in during the morning, is this when people might be using or not using substances? Or would it be better to go in the afternoon? There are a lot of different things to consider when you're doing your scheduling, but whatever you do, be consistent and be reliable, because that's going to be a basis of credibility for you. If you are going to say an encampment environment or even to individuals, if you can tell them, hey, let's set this up. Let's make sure that you know that I'm coming on X day on around X time. One, it'll be more apt for that person to be there. But two, you also are minimalizing the potential heightened anxiety reaction to someone showing up that they may not be expecting. Make sure everyone knows about your schedule and inform and coordinate with other groups and be discreet with the information. I even had a group that I did a site visit for that had, you know, taken a police group out with them to do certain outreach. It was an effort to have people understand that the police were going to help them and get familiar with them and help the police to understand the plight of the people experiencing homelessness and other things. But then that became an issue because the police would use it to then turn around and eradicate the encampments because now they knew where they were. So, You got to be very diligent in how you judge the situation and who's appropriate to take with you, because if you're seen as the person that brought in the group that got their encampment destroyed, you're not going to have a very good reaction when you come into that area or try to help the people in that situation. And so be discreet with all your interactions with the people experiencing homelessness. They're at high risk and you don't need to add to that. So when you are being discreet, just discussing where people are can put them at significant risk. If someone overhears you and they have malicious intent and they want an easy target, well, now you've sent someone who doesn't have physical walls, wooden walls, brick walls, etc. And essentially people can just go and find them, and it's like a sitting duck situation. So now that we're going to move into the safety during outreach, steps to ensure your safety on site. So during outreach, there are several different things. There are universal precautions. And in the EMS world, these are things like gloves and masks. And if you need, you have gowns and helmets and things that you put across your face so that you can use as a respirator in case it's needed, because you know that X, Y, or Z chemical, et cetera, is present. You need to wash your hands or sanitize, wear closed-toe shoes, and don't touch your face. I think we learned that one from COVID, but still, universal precautions should be in place, and you should be aware of these. And some people just aren't trained and they don't know or understand that blood and bodily fluids should always be treated as if they contain HIV or hepatitis, especially. Bloodborne and airborne pathogens training could benefit everyone. So just to be aware of how easily things can be spread. And for pre-engagement, we want to at all times be aware, assess for your risks as you go along, as you're walking up to a place. Depends on whether or not you should take more than one person by the types of situations you're seeing. Make sure you're taking in, are there tons of people? Are there not tons of people? Is there one person standing there? What are the physical reactions? What are their body language modalities telling you? Assess all the factors that you can, and if you need to, terminate before you enter if you don't feel it's safe. Another thing that while you're going on site but you haven't engaged yet, as someone was mentioning, don't carry anything of personal value. If you're walking in with expensive jewelry or a purse, especially, one example is if someone's using substances and they need money to get more substances, and you're carrying a Coach purse into the situation, or you're carrying a handgun that could be sold for a lot of money, chances are you're not walking out of there with those things, and you've now become a victim. Be aware of your surroundings at all times, which was already mentioned. Don't carry cash. If someone knows that you carry cash, that makes you a target as well. Conduct your site visits during daylight hours when you can, and as it's appropriate for your team. It's something as simple as not leaving something visible in your car can be a big help when you're conducting outreach as far as being safe. Prepare all the materials that you need in advance and carry them with you. You don't want to make a habit of sitting in your car for 5 hours and you're caught up in doing something or packaging something, and then someone is there at your doorway, and God forbid if they have malicious intent. So be prepared, be cautious, lock your doors when you need to, but at the same time, when you're out, don't walk in with the body language that you're scared. It's a bad idea to walk anywhere and show vulnerability, because that makes you a target as well. Know the layout of where you're going. And as someone else mentioned, because you guys have been doing this a while, know your exit routes. I always say no more than one exit route if possible. I know some encampments that I've been in, it's a little hard to judge what might be a good exit versus not, because of how they're conducted or constructed throughout, but be knowledgeable that know as much as you can and plan for escape if you need to. In addition, when you're looking at the parking, circle the area once just to get a feel for what's going on there. There might be some well-lit areas versus non-well-lit areas, and park so you can easily enter and exit your car in relationship to your destination. When you look at outreach locations, this is pretty much anywhere. It's anywhere people can be: woods and rivers and alleys and streets and libraries and meal sites. There are tons of other places, transportation stops. I'm from Pennsylvania. In Philadelphia, we had a ton of people that would live in the subways. So know your areas, know what's common, but no matter what you do, understand that no matter where people are located, that is home. So act as if you're walking into their living room as an invited guest. Conduct yourself in that same manner. So when you're entering their living environment, meet people where they are. And that means geographically, emotionally, and physically. You need to make sure, and I say this a lot because sometimes in PATH, we misunderstand. We say your only focus is to get people housed, and that's not the case. PATH is from SAMHSA. SAMHSA also understands that you need to be able to accept help or move on to different steps in Maslow's hierarchy. So when you're doing outreach, make sure that you're working with what the person feels their need is, not necessarily the things that you're trying to impose as their needs. You got to make sure, if you can, to meet the basic needs, because what do we learn from Maslow's hierarchy? You got to meet basic things like shelter, clothing, and food and water. So we need to meet those first. And those are a lot of times, if used sparingly, good ideas to get into the community. And whatever you do, be respectful and treat everyone with dignity. People that, and this seems basic for you because you've been doing the outreach, but this is not a pleasant situation for anyone. Treating people with dignity, no matter what their environment, is so essential. And as far as being safe, again, anything to keep the situation calm and not elevate is what's needed. When we, for instance, walk into a situation on an ambulance, if we walk in, I swear that you could talk a person into having a cardiac incident. If you walk in and you're all excited and you're like, how are you doing? Oh my God, I got a call. Oh my God. And you're flipping out, chances are that the reaction is going to be reciprocated. And if someone's having slight pain, you might now have agitated to the point, because you've increased their blood flow, you've increased their blood pressure, and all these sorts of things, that you've now led them into a more severe situation. It's very similar with entering the living environment. So keep things as calm as you can so that they don't escalate. Obviously, you know that the relationship is central to any interaction, and you need to create a safe, open, friendly space regardless. Now, there obviously are going to be some challenges when you're doing outreach. There are going to be some things like mental illness and substance abuse that are just part of doing outreach. Everyone knows that you don't necessarily choose to live in poor conditions. And so there's probably some trauma involved. And that has created a lack of trust or a fear of commitment. And there's limited resources and housing available. So knowing and reminding yourself of these things as you walk into situations can help you stay safe. Watch for the body movements, the speech, the facial cues, and as I said, the agitation level. Be careful of the angry verbalizations and the emotional distress. If someone seems irrational, confused, or if they're showing signs of intoxication, ask yourself, do you feel safe or do you not? assess this risk and move forward based on your assessment. Again, and you're going to hear this a few times because it comes from a lot of different sources, be respectful. Respect all three types of space as if you are visiting your neighbor or friend. Respect the personal space, the physical space, and the community. Because if you don't, this is just going to lead to defensive actions which escalate and lead to potential harm. When you're entering and you're trying to approach residents, clearly identify yourself, your agency, and your purpose. Don't surprise or corner anyone. Everyone knows you don't physically walk up and push someone into a corner because cornered animals react. And, it's just like trying to catch a stray dog off the street. If you push them in a corner, chances are they're going to growl and start getting agitated and react to that and get defensive. So don't do that with humans either. Approach with calmness. And if people are giving you signs that they don't want to be approached, make that call again. Evaluate, is this the time to be approaching this person or not? Acknowledge simple things like smiling, asking them how they're doing. Don't expect the person or force them to mirror what you're doing. It might not happen. And take your cues, read the person, and react appropriately. You want to keep your physical space between the two of you. Again, that relates to making sure that you have visuals of escape routes, because you don't know what kind of trauma this person has had. Something simple like you getting even an inch within their personal space and they don't like that might make them react. So without knowing someone's background, be very careful how you're approaching them because you don't know what might be a trigger. As I said, handing things out to people can be a good idea, especially when it's helpful, like the hygiene packs or blankets or food, etc. And it will help you build trust and rapport because people see you as a resource. But keep in mind, use this sparingly. Again, it's sort of like if you come in with money or that expensive purse or whatever it is. If you take valuables, people are going to associate you with that. And if you come back in the future and you don't have that, that might be an issue. Make sure that you are using these things as an into actual interaction that's meaningful and conversation to move forward with your work with PATH. Use them in small doses. Like we said, the cash can put people at risk. Gift nominal amounts, because if you're handing out $20 gift cards for Walmart or transportation, etc., people are going to know, oh, that's the guy with the big bucks ones. Let's get him. He's going to have more for us. And if people need it for alternative motives, they can sell that for a higher price tag, and you've now put a mark on yourself. And consider that people can become dependent on the resources like this. And one of the goals of outreach is to actually link people to long-term support and services. So teaching people to fish rather than giving people fish. So as far as entering the environment overall, describe available resources and allow the person to decide how to proceed. Don't make the choice for them. You can work with motivational interviewing, but again, don't force yourself. Never make the assumption of what the person needs, because if you offend them or hurt their pride, etc., again, it might result in you having to defend yourself. Whatever you do, be yourself, because if nothing else, if you're disgenuine or you're trying to employ an approach that doesn't work for you and it comes across as disgenuine, that's almost as bad as walking in with cash stapled to your t-shirt. So people can sense genuine versus not. Listen, actually listen. Don't just hear, listen to what people are saying and respond rather than react. So if you feel unsafe when you're entering an environment overall, or someone is at risk of hurting themselves or others, call for help. So some effective practice characteristics, again, you guys know this, but harm reduction, being person-centered, consistent and trusting, relationships, honesty, persistency, being culturally competent and trauma-informed. Don't invade people's space. Don't make promises you can't keep, because that'll also lead to negative reactions when you come back. Don't go alone. Don't preach pride or pry, and don't go too early or too late. Any questions at this point? Kind of guessing not, because you guys probably know a lot of that. All right. How are we on time, Tony?
We've got about half an hour.
Okay. So one of the big things that I can say, and especially from being an EMT, is that you can de-escalate to help with your safety. This is mitigating the circumstances at play. I'm also a crisis intervention team instructor. And one of the biggest things that we teach with crisis intervention team, which is not to be confused with crisis intervention overall, crisis intervention team is a 40-hour course in which the primary focus is de-escalation and understanding different conditions in which you might interact to de-escalate a situation. So using de-escalation can obviously diffuse some of your outreach situations as well. When a person becomes upset, weapon or no weapon, talking to them and returning to a state of calm is the appropriate thing. It's important to keep this in mind. You know, and we teach this in CIT class, you can't reason with a person that's enraged. Once the emotional reactions have kicked in, that's it. You're dealing with emotion, and trying to rationalize with emotion is not easy. The first and only objective in de-escalation is to reduce the level of arousal, because arousal is what's causing the escalation of everything. Once you decrease that level of arousal, then you might be able to actually have discussion and come to an agreement on what to do next. De-escalation techniques are not an initial response. And I know that seems kind of weird, but I mean, just general talking and alternating how you speak with someone or asking more questions, that might be more appropriate. Remaining calm, as I mentioned before, make sure that you're not adding to the situation. So if you're trying to de-escalate, don't react with emotion. Don't give the physical signs that you're not comfortable. Don't, just remain calm. Deep breaths. I know it seems simple, but it really does help in that situation. Appear calm and centered in tense situations, and it's amazing how much credibility you will garner at that point. And the biggest thing that we also teach in crisis intervention team is that these skills are not second nature. So you must practice them to get to that point. It might seem logical, oh, well, I talked to them about this. Well, that's great. But until you actually practice it and someone comes back and plays devil's advocate and you have to apply different methodologies to de-escalate, you might not succeed if you're trying to use de-escalation when it's actually needed. Something in a CIT class we also have is what we call the verbal playbook. So this is verbally what you do when you come in. Introduce yourself, ask the person's name, express that, you know, say what you're seeing. So you're going to identify the emotions you're seeing, what you see, and use the I word. When I say all this, I mean, you know, you're going to say, oh, I can see that you're angry. I think you're angry. If I understand correctly, you're saying you're angry because you feel as if you're getting cheated by this system. Is that correct? So you walk in, you do these steps, you identify the situation, hopefully identify the emotion that you're seeing and it's accurate, and say, I think you're feeling this way because of this, and this is how I'm seeing it. Is that correct? And summarize. That way you can be the active listener. This is how you can communicate with a person in crisis, because then the person is feeling heard. Feeling heard is part of de-escalating, making sure that a person feels as if their opinion or reaction to a situation is valued, but it doesn't mean that they can continue to stay in that heightened level of arousal. So communicate with that person and summarize based on what you've learned or obtained. Employ clarity to de-escalate. By this, I mean you're going to verbally clarify, physically clarify with your body positioning, and also physically clarify with your hand gestures. So if you remain calm and use a low tone of voice, instead of yelling and screaming and telling this and moving your arms around, it's very different. So again, you need to match what you're saying with your bodily actions. Your verbals need to match your nonverbals. Again, if someone is insecure or frightened or overly stimulated by your interaction with them, it might lead to them taking actions that would not be beneficial for your safety. So reduce your speech volume. Talk slowly so it's easily understood. Maintain your distance. Do a non-threatening stance. Don't lean up and get in people's faces. Use your hands up and palms up and soft stops. Don't pound into communication or thud down with your feet, etc. Some strategies for intervention. Baby steps. This might seem normal, but I mean, if you want them to get into a police car and go to the police station, that's one thing. Or if you want them to get into the rehab center, let's make small goals. Let's make small tangible goals based on where they are now. If that's your eventual goal, that's great. But let's say, okay, how about you come down from the table and we're going to talk down here. That way you're safer. Does that sound better? Then you won't have a chance of falling down. Assume the person has a real concern and meet the reasonable demands when possible. When I say reasonable demand, this is things like, I need a glass of water, things of that nature. Be very present during these situations. Always, again, be aware of your circumstances and your environment, but at the same time, be open and calming in your presentation. Bring the focus around the room. There might be a lot of stimulus going on, because let's face it, when someone's excited or erratic, they're going to bring the attention of everyone else around them to them. So they're very distracted on who to pay attention to because they see everyone that's coming near them now as a threat. You need to bring the focus to you, have them focus just on you and not everything else around them. Attempt to reduce that stimuli. You know, if you need to, say, hey, let's move over here, or calmly walk away, and hopefully someone will be with you that can help mitigate the other circumstances and move people away. You want to reduce the anxiety so that you can control the physical symptoms and control movements. You want to lead the interaction as part of de-escalation. Frequently reassure the person that they're safe. You're not here to hurt them. That how you tell them how you can provide safety. Look for areas of agreement and make sure that there's no time limit on this. I know that a lot of crisis intervention team officers have been called out, and sometimes these calls will be 3 times longer than a normal go out, slap on the handcuffs and walk away with someone. But at the same time, when you factor in the mental and emotional and physical safety of everyone involved, it's worth the investment in the time. When you get someone linked up to a proper service rather than going into a spiraling criminal justice environment with recidivism that only leads them into poorer conditions, that's a good thing. It's worth the time up front. So make sure that you don't just say, oh, I got to be out of here in 5 minutes. I can't. That's not going to work. If you need to, if you as the person presenting and working with someone are not succeeding, it's okay. Say, you know what, officer so-and-so, or, you know, my coworker so-and-so might be helpful with that. He or she is da-da-da-da-da. And whatever it is, bridge how that person might be able to help more and do that transition. When you're working with someone, one way of judging how out of control they are is to do little quizzes. Do you remember, what's my name again? and just do a touch to see what is needed and how far they are so that you can employ the proper techniques moving forward. Basic things for de-escalation: empathic understanding, genuineness, and understanding. So when we talk about empathic listening, it's actually the ability to understand the other person's concerns and feelings. It leads to compassion and sets the stage for crisis resolution. Part of empathic listening is empathic understanding is active listening and active observing. Get rid of the noise, focus, understand the internal and external noises, and get rid of both of those, because if you have stuff going on in your mind, you need to get rid of that so you can focus properly. Make sure that you're restating information, the facts as the person sees them, and that you're reflecting. As we did earlier, I get the impression that you're feeling abandoned by or disconcerted by, you're upset by, and use the open and closed-ended questions and I to only statements. Again, you're not trying to say, you are this. You're trying to say, what I'm understanding is, and a lot of you have already heard about this. When you're looking at empathic listening, when we talk about filtering out the noise, we mentioned internal and external. Internal, that's your agendas, deadlines, advice. You're hungry, or you're thirsty, or your eyes itch, or whatever the case may be. External, cars, industry, animals, and other people. When we're doing active listening, we're focusing, and I love the cat, you're focusing on the person experiencing difficulty in his or her world. So try to block out the distractions. When you're being fully engaged, you're being very cautious about the words you use, the voice tone, the language you're using with your body, as well as the words that are coming out of your mouth. And empathic understanding includes checking in as part of that active listening, making sure you understand what they're saying and feeling about the situation. So that's why we so many times say, I think if I'm understanding, you're feeling angry because so-and-so stole your water bucket. Is that correct? Some of the benefits of restatement and reflection: you're making sure that you're hearing correctly, because if you're trying to approach a situation and you have the wrong problem, chances are you're going to get the wrong solution. And that's only going to lead to everything getting ramped up again. The person is going to recognize that you're trying. You're building that trust. And building that trust is a major part of de-escalation. And when the person realizes that you're affirming their feelings as real and legitimate, again, you're gaining the respect from that person, and it enhances your chances of success in de-escalating. And restatement and reflection allows you to get it right. Make sure that you are understanding correctly. And if the individual is listening to you, they'll correct you. So if you're saying something and it's absolutely the 180 degrees from what they just said, and they're like shaking their head, yes, that's going to give you a clue too that they aren't really listening to you. So you might have to try something else. Part of empathic listening is using open-ended questions. What, when, why, how, things of that nature. Could you tell me about it? Could you describe? And I said why earlier, but avoid the why questions, because why automatically puts up the defense. It makes people want to react more assertively because you've cornered them, essentially, verbally, that is. Benefits of this: you're able to get more information. You can check out the red flag for the nonverbals. You can assess their level of dangerousness and assess if the person is in touch with reality. Closed-ended questions. Believe it or not, closed-ended questions can actually be useful. You're able to get critical information quickly because it's a yes or no type of answer, and you're able to begin formulating a plan of action immediately. Are you angry to the point of, do you feel, will you need, things of that nature? Are you thinking of harming yourself? For those of you that have had any suicide prevention training, a lot of you understand that you need to ask the question. It might not be comfortable, but you need to ask point blank, are you thinking of harming yourself? And one of the other benefits of closed-ended questions is it gets you a commitment to something. May I call an ambulance for you? That's yes, but now, as I said, able to formulate a plan and move forward. You've now taken that baby step that we mentioned earlier, and you're now moving toward an overall goal that's beneficial for both of you. Will you agree to talk to a therapist? Again, that's a yes or no, moving the situation forward. When you use the I statements, this is expressing to the person what you're observing. Label that emotion. You seem angry. You seem sad. You seem frustrated. Whatever that it is, express that emotion. Recognize it. Identify it. When you use the I statements, oh, I can see that you're angry because you're doing this. I can hear from your words that you are upset. You appear to be confused. This, again, just part of the communication process of the de-escalation. When you use owning or I statements, because that's what I statements are, I think, I this, I that, you're taking responsibility for what you're thinking and feeling and saying. So I understand that, or I think that, but be careful when you use these. You don't want to use a ton of them because, again, you want to make sure the person understands that the focus is on them, not you. So when you use I too frequently, that may come across incorrectly. So while they're useful, use them sparingly. When you're doing this, you use them for clarification, and whatever you do, just be consistent and honest. And make sure that it's calm while you're saying I, instead of I think. When you are expressing anything, again, I want to re-emphasize, it's sort of like the cat that knows that you don't like cats. Well, guess what? Guess whose leg they're going to run up against? It's going to be yours, because they sense that. Same with genuineness in your target audience. If there is not genuineness in your actions, this is going to be apples to oranges. You know, your actions say this, but your words say this, not the same. So make sure that you're real. Whatever you do, don't make your role be why you say something. For instance, people might expect, oh, well, you're a social worker, so you're of course going to say this, or you're a police officer, you're of course going to say this. You need to be able to be honest and just be a human and respond that way. Be spontaneous and adaptable to the situations. I'm not sure what we can do with that, but I'm willing to work with you to figure something out. That might be something that's more appropriate than something a person can perceive as, oh, well, that's what you're supposed to say. No, you're talking real things. Again, match your body to your words. Be sincere and be present. I mean, obviously, if you're looking around and doing things of that nature, you guys know this. This is just basic communication, but it all does come together as far as de-escalation. When you're being genuine, you instill confidence that there's potential in those around them to help them, leads to both being on the same side, and keeps you both understanding the situation similarly. Acceptance is another part of the de-escalation process. So understand that everyone has a right to interpret situations in whatever way they do. So accepting that that person believes X, Y, or Z is happening to right now, and they have a right to feel X, Y, or Z way is fine. You know, understand and accept that they have a right to react. respect the dignity of the person, obviously without any regards to race, religion, sex orientation, cleanliness, etc., because they're a human being, and you know that. It's not easy when a person is behaving in a bizarre or weird or angry or hostile manner, but being able to accept them despite them acting that way is very powerful in de-escalating the situation. So Carl Rogers had this wonderful comment about listening and hearing. When someone realizes that they have been deeply heard, his eyes moisten. I think in some real sense, he is weeping for joy. It is as though he was saying, thank God someone heard me. Someone knows what it's like to be me. Well, everyone wants that, right? And especially someone that's angry. You know, if your partner, when you're having a problem or angry about something and they come back and you know what, you're right, I was wrong with that. How do you react? It's much more soothing than when someone reacts in kind and gets angry back at you, right? So the point is, make sure that the person feels as if they're being heard, because that will be the biggest step in mitigating, and know that your words are important. I love this quote, because if you care about something, you call it a flower. If you want to kill something, you call it a weed. I think that's a perfect expression that connotations come with our choices of words. So be very careful what is communicated. So you should also have some safety policies and procedures for staff while they're conducting outreach and engagement. Some sample policies that came across, and again, I took these from so many different sources. I have the National Healthcare for the Homeless, I have SAMHSA, I have, I believe even some HUD resources in here, but a lot of outreach and engagement related entities have given feedback, and I've tried to take all these and put them into the next few slides. So some sample safety policies might be, hey, you must have 2 people when you're going out to do this. Don't separate from your team. Now, learn about everything before you go into the field to do the work, and make sure you always introduce yourself. While these might be simplistic, knowing that they're required is a good thing. Just knowing that there's something on paper to help guide you too is sometimes helpful in calming you in these different situations. So when you're out, again, some sample policies would be that you need to display badges or IDs to identify your organization. You need to ask permission. You need to be trustworthy. And if a person is engaging someone else, they should be alert and watching the area. You must have an active and working phone with them. Again, you may or may not be able to use the phone due to service issues, but you need to have one. Again, I know earlier I mentioned that code word thing, but it could be something that signals a threat who someone else can very calmly and discreetly just go off and take care of it while you deal with the immediate in front of you. Know that these phone applications that can broadcast your location could be effective. And again, make sure you introduce yourself. Wear your matching clothing as possible if that's something you can do. I understand that wearing matching clothing may not be the most effective if you're trying to blend in, but at the same time, if you're looking at the safety perspective, one, it makes sure that people understand who you are and why you're there, because it becomes understood with repetition, but understand what your company's policy is on that. Another policy might be linking people with crisis response teams and behavioral health supports. So having those linkages available to you might be part of the policy. as you've all been doing, I'm sure, use your harm reduction principles. Again, safety and comfort, not the same thing. It's perceived threats versus actual threats as well. For instance, we're back to witnessing drug use is not necessarily a threat to safety. Weapons and mace, don't take things that are tempting. It could escalate very quickly, create time and space, and use trauma-informed supervision. So that was a lot of information, and I'm just kind of curious. How many of you have used de-escalation techniques in the field or felt the need to use de-escalation techniques in the field? Anyone?
Feel free to come off mute or type in the chat.
Plenty of times, yes. So absolutely, wonderful. So the types of details for the technique, was that something that can be employed with your agencies? Is that useful? Have you ever used crisis intervention team officers to go with you or help respond to a situation? Yes, all the above. Excellent. And one thing I wanted to point out too, and sometimes people don't realize this, when I mentioned the crisis intervention teams, oh, look, I work for part-time for a mobile crisis team. Excellent, excellent. It might be an educational point too that could also help you, is making sure people understand that they can, if they're in a situation where they need to call for police assistance, that they can request a CIT trained officer. One may or may not be available depending on how many officers are trained and the availability in your area, but knowing that you can call for a CIT trained officer might help mitigate a lot of people's fear of bringing an officer into their areas. And I'm just curious, and I believe it's pronounced Janelli, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. How did that go when you worked closely with the CIT officers? Did you find it beneficial? Can you give us an example of an interaction?
It's actually Janelle. That's my personal Zoom name. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, we have CIT officers on staff in the building that we will go out on calls with. So we know a lot of them, work pretty regularly with a few of them. So I mean, it works out. Some of them really understand. They go through the training and everything. They're really empathetic. So that's kind of what we've dealt with as far as that goes.
Do you have any specific instances that you noticed that the CIT trained officer was effective in de-escalating?
I mean, I'm sure I have quite a few. It is really hard with especially with the population of people experiencing homelessness, with having that automatic lack in trust of officers. But there are some people that know this one officer I can think of specifically who also works with the homeless initiative, and they respond to him pretty well. Just because he doesn't berate anyone. Like I said, he's really empathetic. So he kind of makes sure that he talks to them like they're humans and doesn't talk down to them. So that's the big thing, that you've stressed throughout this too, is making sure that you're on their level and not having that power dynamic. So
absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you, Janelle. I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I was very excited by that, seeing that you worked closely with the officers, and I was just curious how that was working out in your community. Thank you.
I did just want to add, from a state perspective, the commissioner of the Department of Safety, who oversees the state police, prioritizes CIT. He is very much on board with it, and I know it's recorded, so I don't want to misspeak, but I think they're at 40% right now of their troopers that have gone through this. So I think average it's 10% across the nation. Again, don't quote me on that, but I know that is heavily emphasized, and the reduction of incidences, and that the language that you were just mentioning, the dignity of person, is all emphasize.
Excellent. That's fantastic to hear. And for those of you who don't know, the whole CIT movement and a lot of the principles that we've discussed here. Oh, yes, someone who's saying sometimes just a change of face can help. Maybe another staff has a better rapport. Exactly. And when we were saying about switching out, if you working with someone didn't work, that's fine. So yes, very good point, Julia. I just wanted to say too that with the CIT, this was all born out of a misconception that led to a citizen's death, and it didn't need to be that way. So I think it's fantastic. And again, that goes back to the buy-in from the head down. So if your head on your state level is buying into that, everyone is going to move and agree with that. But all the techniques that are employed by these officers are the things that I've brought out today. So, oh, and yes, Derek, very good. Don't take the negative interaction personally. It's the situation speaking. It's the frustration. It's the emotion that's speaking. It's not you. Understanding that is really big to taking a step back and being able to de-escalate a situation. Very good point. But hopefully these were good pieces for you. And I'm very happy to see that your state is employing the CIT officers in such a large scale. That makes me very happy. Oh, there's a good thing from Angie. Q-tip. Quit taking it personally. I like that. I have to remember that one. But a lot of the same techniques that they employ to stay safe can make you safe as well. So thank you very much for your time today.